Let's do some role-playing. Suppose someone you love is dying. What would you say to that loved one? Don't be afraid. Are you comfortable? You don't look very comfortable. What is this like? Can I get you something? It's tough, isn't it? It's even harder when someone is really in distress. When someone says things like, I'm falling, or I don't know how to do this, referring to I don't know how to die, or why doesn't God take me? These kinds of things can leave you speechless. By understanding the stages of death, you can help someone who is going through terminal delirium, who is seeing things, who is anxious and in turmoil. We experienced all of these things with the death of my mother-in-law recently. My background as a Tibetan Buddhist student does help me, and as a chaplain in a hospital, I was able to practice with lots of patients. Christian or Jewish or other chaplains do the same all the time. I want to briefly talk about a few things that are communicated in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and that can help you, as well as some other things too. And they aren't necessarily Buddhist. They are natural meditative approaches that people can cultivate as psychological tools or psychological practices, and they don't have to necessarily be religious prayer. First, you may have heard about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The general message is that dying is just as important as living. By dying calmly and consciously and in the highest spiritual state you can generate, you are able to control your experience of the bardo, the intermediate state between this life and the next, and you can control your rebirth. You may not have to be reborn. You may be able to get off the wheel of suffering, which is uncontrolled rebirth. You may be able to achieve a state of enlightenment. You may be able to go back and help others attain one of these accomplishments themselves. Simply realizing that there is a process and that process can be understood and that you should study it is a revelation. It was a revelation to me. I always thought that death was something to be feared. It is the ultimate mystery. What if nothing happens after you die and you absolutely cease to exist? Or what if it hurts and it's scary and you end up in hell or some in-between place where nothing happens? The idea that you can rehearse for death and prepare for it and even gain some control over the process was mind-boggling to me. One thing that was amazing to me, though, is the comfort that my mother-in-law and my wife took in the teachings on this subject by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We read a book called Joy, which is a dialogue between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. The two of them were great friends. I read some of this book to Annette, and I was surprised at the level of detail it went into regarding the Tibetan view of the death process, and the Christian view too. She was very interested in all of this. So that's one suggestion I have for you. Read someone a book like this, or another book that they might find interesting. There's a book I mentioned on my website called Dying, A Natural Passage by a nurse named Dennis Cope. My mother-in-law found this very reassuring and very helpful. Then there is a book by the Dalai Lama called Advice on Dying, which goes into even more detail on the dying process, and this helped us too. One thing the Dalai Lama says is to remind the dying person to think virtuous thoughts. You might mention people they love, or prayer, or the spirit, or wonderful places they've visited, or things they've accomplished in their life, things that brought them joy and happiness, and ways they brought joy and happiness to other people. I strongly suggest, personally, you turn off the TV if it is blaring out non-virtuous things, as it has a habit of doing. The death process is the time for the spirit. It's the time for joy. It's the time for telling someone you love them, or you admire them, or you're thankful for them. You can tell someone this if you're a doctor, right? You are thankful for your patients because everyone teaches you something and gives you a chance to practice and learn and grow. This reminds me of the 4 traditional phrases that are good to say to a loved one when they are in the dying process. These were written out on a paper, in fact, in the hospice where my mother-in-law was at recently. They are, thank you, I forgive you, please forgive me, I love you. So I think we're going to stop there for now. There's much more to say and many more pieces of advice I can give on what to say to someone who's dying, but I'm going to save that for another video. For now, the point is that whether you're a family member or a friend or a hospice employee or a chaplain or a doctor, you have a lot of things you can say to someone who's dying. And I encourage you to take that opportunity. It's such a profound experience. It is one you will never forget. It is one of the greatest things you can do for another human being. And it will give you a lot of benefit. It'll warm your heart and help you in so many ways. So to recap, keep it virtuous, keep it positive, turn off the TV, maybe put on some of the person's favorite music, read a book that they like, a book that might inspire them, a book that might provoke discussion. People really like to be read to. I know I do. So that's always a good one. And think about saying the 4 classic things: thank you, forgive, I forgive you, please forgive me, and the most important one, I love you. And I love you all too, and I thank you for coming in and spending a few minutes with me. There'll be much more on this in the next video, and until then, please subscribe, and I wish you peace.